Got a special guest on today. His name's College Football with Sam, and you guys know him as a Michigan fan. That's why I had to bring him on. You know, it's been what's the right word? A down week in Lincoln. It's been a little bit draining for some over these past few. I know Nebraska hasn't been as hot as we would hope they would have been, and there have been some mistakes that have made us doubt what their long-term potential is, or at least their potential is for this season. I wanted to bring on someone who could give us hope. I wanted to bring on someone who could tell us why Michigan should be afraid to come into Lincoln and why Nebraska does have a chance. So that's why he's here. Tomorrow, I've got to get up at 4:20 a.m. Alarm is already set. I went and paid the $40 upgrade on Southwest just to make sure I could sit in a aisle seat because I don't do windows or middles. But I'll be up at 4:20 on my way to gate 50-something at LAX. I got to be on the plane by 5:25. We fly to Kansas City. Well, I fly solo. I land, I meet up with my friend Tyler. We then drive from Kansas City to Lincoln, 2.5 hours, and then the fun begins. I get to start seeing some corn-crazed Army members. I get to go back into Lincoln where I haven't been in almost a year, maybe 9 months. And Caden sent me some really nice messages this morning on Instagram. Caden offered to pick me up from the airport. Caden offered to drive me around Lincoln so I could party. I mean, you guys are awesome. Caden, thank you for the $5 super chat. I hope I get to meet you this trip. I'm not going to have you drive me around. I will be calling Ubers because it's just not right to have one of these college kids drive me around while I'm in town. Also, Caden, I saw you sent me another $2 super chat, so thank you for that. Anyway, I want to bring College Football with Sam in. Well, first I want to shout out James for giving away 10 Corn Craze memberships. There's so much support from this channel always, no matter how down bad it is. I still hit 10,000 views minimum, and there's still a select group of Nebraska fans who care about the little details, and that's why you guys are still watching my videos. So thank you for that. I dropped my Michigan preview yesterday. I know you already saw it, but I'm just making sure you know it's there. I want to bring in Sam. Let me click him in. Sam, welcome to the show. I told you that one of the reasons that I needed you to come on was because there's been some bad energy. Not bad energy, just no energy. There's been a lifeless kind of feel around my audience. And there's a lot of people who are excited. I'm not saying there aren't. But a lot of the people who I would usually see commenting aren't, which to me means they're not watching. They don't care. They're like, I'll just wait until Nebraska's good again to tune back in. If they beat Michigan or if they keep it close, then maybe I'll watch next week. But this week, I don't want any part of it. But Sam, this weekend's a big game. It's the number 2 team in the country. It's Michigan, a team who isn't a rival to Nebraska. They don't play that often, but it feels like when they do play, you get the best from both teams, especially since they know they have to go into relatively hostile environments. I was in Ann Arbor in 2011. I think Amir Abdullah played in that game. Michigan won in a blowout, unfortunately. But the point is, it was a hostile environment, and I felt that energy. I know that in 2021, Michigan came to Lincoln. Same thing. You remember it well. That one went down to the wire. So this weekend, do you think that the crowd plays a factor for Michigan now that they're going to be in their first road test of this season?
Oh, absolutely. Especially when they're facing a rushing defense that is among the nation's elite. That offensive line is going to have to play on their A game. And to talk about belief in a team, as a Michigan fan, I can't exactly relate entirely to the currently Nebraska's losing ways, but I can say that when Michigan hosted Ohio State in 2021, I and many of Michigan's fan base we didn't have any hope. We and myself included picked Ohio State to come in and beat us. But you have to watch the game, you have to participate, and the big house was full. I mean, full of blue and yellow pom poms. And I bet many of them wouldn't have picked Michigan to win, but they showed up anyway. And then Michigan, after exchanging punches for a quarter, 2 quarters, really a half, they came out and they just pummeled Ohio State in the third quarter. And that's all to say that that broke a long streak of losing to Ohio State. And at some point, Nebraska has to win. They have to beat a top 25, top 10 team. And I have Michigan personally pegged as the number one team in the country, but that doesn't mean they're invincible. Everyone, oh,
Especially because they're college kids. Anything can happen with these college kids. We saw it last week with Clemson. Their kicker couldn't make a 29-yarder. That's the University of Clemson, a team that's been in the national championship multiple times in the last 6 years. They are not invincible.
absolutely.
Continue.
Yeah. And going back to 2021, the team that won the Big Ten in Michigan, they had to fight for every inch and every yard against Nebraska. Now, I think that 2021 Nebraska's team was probably better than they were this season, but then again, we're still only 4 games in. We have a lot to learn about these teams. Michigan has never played on the road, and this is their first road test against a fan base that's very engaged, very energetic.
The people
Honestly,
who are
from
going to
my
be
own
at that
perspective,
game, they are going to be engaged and energetic.
yeah. And honestly, from my own perspective, as a Michigan fan, I'm sort of glad it's not a night game and
Oh,
it's a 3:30
come on.
kickoff.
It's a home run for Michigan. They got lucky. Imagine the environment for night games in Memorial Stadium are a different level. Caleb,
Exactly.
thank you for the $2 super chat. I'm glad you're always here for Nebraska and always here for Corn Crazed. Caleb fired another five. He said, so Sam, thank you for the five. So, Sam, would you say this is Michigan's first big test of the season? Now, before you answer this, Sam, I've seen comments on my channel saying that Rutgers was more of a test for Michigan than Nebraska, which I obviously laugh at. Not that Rutgers is a bad team, but I think Nebraska presents a different set of challenges, especially given the circumstances of being on their first or in their first road game. So you can answer for Caleb here.
If Rutgers had Nebraska's stadium and fan base and Michigan traveled on the road to play Rutgers, then I might agree with some of those comments. I think that Rutgers is a really good pass defense and they have an improved quarterback and passing game. But this being on the road, the first road game, more importantly, I think this is Michigan's biggest test of the season yet. Absolutely. And I think Vegas reflects that in their point spread.
Let's go back to what you said before. Really quick, what was the spread last week? Rutgers, Michigan, 24?
Yeah, 24. Michigan pushed. They ended up winning by
I
24.
remember I bet on Rutgers, so I was very happy with that push. But I do think, obviously, the point spread reflects that. Going back to something you said before, the 2021 Nebraska team, do you think that's a better team overall than this year's Nebraska team? And another question, who do you think finishes with a better record,
Who do I think between, oh
2021
yeah,
and
2021
2023?
and this year? I think this year's Nebraska team finishes with a much better record. If there's one edge I'm going to give to this year's team over 2021's team, They have an easier schedule and they have a better coaching staff and I think a better mentality. I just think 2021's team with Adrian Martinez who could at least pass the ball, and there were other weapons at wide receiver like Samari Torre, Austin Allen at tight end, and then we can't forget Garrett Nelson defensively and other players. What was Cam Taylor Britt on that team? I think he was in his
2021,
final
yes.
season. Yeah, players like that. I read an interesting article talking about statistics in college football that basically said Nebraska that year, from a statistical point of view, had a better chance of getting 10 wins than 3. So that team was very much not in the business of being clutch or pulling away, as we all know from Michigan, Iowa that season. I think this team has the ability to win games and come back from adversity in a way that that team doesn't. But I think that the 2021 Husker squad does have, and they had more talent at most positions.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's just they didn't know how to win, and that's why we saw so many close losses. So let's talk about position by position. Go through Michigan. I obviously did my Michigan preview, but I didn't get as into detail because I haven't watched every Michigan game. I've watched points and parts of every game, but I haven't gone into it. So, starting off with the offensive line, I think that's obviously an important part if we're talking about a run defense that's dominant so far. Last year they had, what was the guy's name? Oluwatimi?
Oluwatimi.
Oluwatimi. So Oluwatimi's gone. I think he was their key guy in the center. He won multiple awards. Without him, I think the offensive line is a little bit different. Do you think that's impacted, or it is a reason that they've decided to run it less and why they've gone more West Coast and gone to passing more often and running with JJ? Is that a piece of it, or do you think that they want to spread it out more, or they're not trying to get too much into their running back depth right now and get guys injured?
I think that it's a mix of both. In the preseason, there was constant talk around Michigan about how they were going to pass it around more, and you saw that immediately against East Carolina. But Drake Nugent, the current starting center, I can confidently say for the first 4 games at this very moment is not as good as Oluwatimi. And you see that in the fact that despite Zach Zinner and Trevor Keegan, the guards returning, Michigan has not found ways to open up gaping holes in opposing defensive lines. I call that parting the Red Sea. Michigan has not been able to do that whatsoever this season. Now, part of it is opposing defenses are stacking the box more because they saw Michigan's rush attack last year, but the offensive line is not the same. I think it's better than the 2021 unit, but it's not as good as last year's unit. And at I forget if it's right or left tackle, but Miles Hinton, one of the tackles, right tackles, been battling through an injury, and he had some moments against Rutgers where he just didn't have the speed or the technique to stop their pass rushers from getting to McCarthy. So there are concerns about explosiveness in the run game and even about protecting the quarterback, I would say.
It didn't look like the JJ had taken a lot of sacks though.
No, it's concern relative to previous seasons. Their pass protection's still great. It's not elite yet, I would say.
So if you had to rank their strengths on their offense, are you going quarterback, running back, receiver, O line?
No, I'd probably go with running back, and then I would go with quarterback, and O line is so tough. I'd still put wide receiver at the bottom. I don't think they have Roman Wilson, who already has 6 receiving touchdowns. It's tied for first in the nation. And Cornelius Johnson's really good. And we can't forget about tight end either with Colston Loveland and AJ Barner. But JJ McCarthy, I need to see more of him before I can look at his performance against Bowling Green as a fluke. So I'm not going to rank him at the top of the offense. I'd put
So
the running back
for
room.
right now, you're saying you're not considering that a fluke.
Um, not not entirely. No,
Has he had a
I
history of games like that?
TCU game. Look at the playoff
Ah,
game against
okay.
TCU. He
Outside of
threw.
that was a mess. I think that the defensive scheme for TCU was incredible, and they came out with a totally different fire than Michigan did to win that game.
Yeah,
If
it's
you
true.
go back outside of the TCU game, which I would consider an anomaly, against Big Ten teams, did he ever have multiple interception games? And was that a consistent issue? Or is this something that was a random occurrence?
I think it was more of a random occurrence, but he has had turnover issues before. And Nebraska, they do run a 3-3-5. I
Yeah.
mean, like TCU. So it's a defense that JJ typically doesn't face because the Big Ten hasn't really adopted the 3-3-5 a whole lot. I know Nebraska did this season. Wisconsin runs it with Mike Tressel. So the Big Ten has some teams that are trying to, they're experimenting and
Yeah.
adapting. But I'd look at it more as a fluke in the scheme of throwing multiple interceptions. But in having one or maybe two turnovers in a game, that is an area that is cause for concern, especially in a game where Michigan and Nebraska are outside of the top 100 in seconds burned per play. They love to limit possessions. Every possession will matter here.
It's a good point. It's going to be 93 degrees in Lincoln on Saturday. I've
Whew,
seen
I
some
did not know
people,
that.
and apparently it's going to be windy as well. I heard that maybe a reason the under dropped from 44 down to 39 was because there's going to be a lot of wind. And in that case, you could have guys going for less field goals because they don't think they're going to make them past 30, 35 yards, right? Now, that could make you feel like you got to take the over. I wouldn't consider this a game where I would take it because I think it's going to stay low scoring. It's going to be similar to that Minnesota game. They're going to try to burn off as much clock as possible. But is there a world where Nebraska, who's pretty well conditioned, they have a totally new strength and conditioning program, as you know, Nebraska, who's well conditioned, and they practice out in this heat, and they did during the offseason. Do you think they could eventually wear Michigan down and they could end up exploding for some big plays late in the game if Michigan's defense is a little bit tired? Is there a chance for that? Or do you think the heat is going to be a non factor?
If there's a chance for that, it would have to be, I think, with Harburg's legs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Michigan getting tired, it'd have to be a combination of things. The heat, like weather, you have to take any factor in. It only really becomes to be a magnified factor if Nebraska's offense is testing Michigan's defense in the first place. If Michigan's able to get early 3-and-outs
Yeah.
and solve this offense quickly, then I think the heat won't matter much. But it's hard for me to say. I know that personally as a fan, I'm not one to say, you know, oh well, it was the weather as to why we lost. I don't
Right.
I don't like those type of excuses.
Although,
So I
pause, Sam. When
okay.
Nebraska got beat down at Michigan last year, a big reason that score was so lopsided was because of the weather. Michigan is built to play in games like that. Nebraska's offense last year was not. So I do think for certain teams, weather is a major factor. Another team example would be Wisconsin. In the past, they've been built for November football. Iowa, built for November football. So
Yeah.
it can play a factor, although if we're talking about a normal day-to-day deal and little weather hiccups, then I think you're right. It's hard to make excuses.
Yeah. I would say that it just depends on how creative and efficient Nebraska's offense is. That's a very good point from you.
Big D, thank you for the $10 super chat. He says, I will always be a Husker fan. Always watch every game. Sounds like me. No matter if Nebraska's great, good, or bad. Haven't been to a game in a couple of years, but will always root for the Huskers. GBR, GBR. Thank you for the $10, by the way. But I get why you haven't been to a game in a couple of years. I mean, you could have a family, you could be busy. But as a fan, if I didn't make content, I probably would have skipped out on the last couple of years as well. I told myself back in 2017, I've told this story to a lot of people. Back in 2017, after I was at the Wisconsin game when Nebraska lost at the end, I mean, they kept it relatively close the entire way through. And then at the end, it kind of got away from them. They lost 35-21, 35-14, somewhere in that range. I was on like a little bus to the airport. And I told myself I'm not coming back to a Nebraska game until they start winning again. And I didn't go all of 2018, and I did end up going in 2019 and watched them lose again, which was the most frustrating thing. But the point is, I understand why people don't go. I understand why people don't want to spend money on it. I understand why it's frustrating to get your heart broken every time. So I'm not a complainer or tell people that they're in the wrong for not going to games or not wanting to support, not wanting to watch until they're good. But, some of us are just built different, Big D. Some of us just love the pain. Fufu says, TCU's 3.35 wasn't even good. Nebraska is good at the 3.35. What do you have to say to that? Because TCU was pretty strong on defense last year. They gave away big plays and they weren't that physical, but they did have playmakers. They were getting a lot of turnovers. I don't know how many of those guys left for the NFL, but they did have some NFL guys on that defense, and I think 7 of those starters or 8 of those starters last year either went pro or graduated, so they had a lot of experience and a lot of playing under their belt before that season. So, what do you
Yeah.
think? Defense from TCU last year or defense from Nebraska this year? What's more of a threat in your eyes?
It's so tough. It's so tough because TCU, it was turnovers, and they actually were they were physical in that Michigan game. They, outside of a long Donovan Edwards run, they shut down Michigan's run game. Um, Big plays though, and then just Michigan toward the end of the game was really able to, you know, I'd say exploit that defense. They put up 45 points on that defense despite turning it over numerous times, failing a fourth down, and also settling for field goals. Um, what fascinates me about Nebraska's 3-3-5 is they've been good all season. You know, TCU's had moments where they consistently allowed, 30 points per game for most of the regular season with a functioning offense that had a Broyles Award OC. And then when they played Michigan and when they played Georgia, they allowed a combined, what I think, 110 points
Yeah, it was 60,
exactly.
65 and 55 or something scored on
Yeah.
them.
The difference, actually, contrary to, the pick sixes from JJ, the difference between Michigan losing to TCU and Georgia beating them was Georgia's defense, to be honest with
Yeah,
you.
they
Because,
smothered him.
yeah, TCU's offense, rather, was able to take advantage of Michigan over pursuing and not expecting a strong run game. I would say Nebraska's defense, just from what I can see, I think is better. I think. The problem, of course, is TCU had an offense that could help their defense rest.
Is there any
Nebraska's,
fear in your eyes? You were really high on Minnesota to start the year.
yep,
Is there any fear in your eyes that Nebraska has gone against such weak opponents offensively outside of Colorado, even though they have no run game? You had Minnesota, you had Northern Illinois, who's a bottom 10 offense nationally, and then Louisiana Tech, who against Nebraska looked great, but I don't think they're going to be that consistent this year. I think they're better with a better quarterback. That Jack guy, whatever his last, I don't remember his last name. Their backup is better than I think Hank Bachmeier. But again, it's not an elite offense. Come on, they're good, but
yeah.
they're not great. So has Nebraska played weaker competition, and that made them look better? Is there any doubt in your mind that they might not be the top or that I think 23rd ranked national defense that they are right now?
I think you're onto something there, and I think you're correct. But to make a comparison back to TCU, they ended the year outside of the top 90 in scoring defense. I
That's
don't think
true.
Nebraska's D is that bad.
They're not.
And
No,
if
no,
they,
Nebraska at the worst, I think, is a top 50 defense, top
I would agree
60.
with you. And you have
So
to remember as well that the offense being just so horrendous in those first two games didn't do the defense any favors. I mean, giving short field.
yeah, Nebraska might actually have a top 15 defense if their offense wouldn't have turned it over 8 times in those first 2 games.
Exactly.
So there
That's
some give and take. I hear you.
yeah.
Caleb has another question. Caleb, thank you for the $5 super chat and thank you for being a member. My biggest concern is Tristan, our kicker. Can he hit those important field goals when called upon? Man, so Tristan Alvano, I'm not sure how much you know about him, Sam. This guy was from Omaha. Great kicker coming out of high school. I think by the kicking standards, he was a 5-star. Comes into Nebraska, wins the job over Timmy Bleekrod. Fans were excited. Fans were pumped for it. But he's a true freshman, so there was always some hesitation like, is he going to make those clutch kicks when needed? Some people are like, well, you go back and watch the high school state championship game. He drained a 50-something yarder. No problem. He's got it. Now he's here. He's struggled a bit. I don't remember what the number is. Maybe he's 1 for 3 on field goals or something.
That's exactly it. He's one of three.
Okay. He's 1 of 3 on field goals. That could play a factor this weekend. It will play a factor this weekend if Nebraska's competitive in this game because Nebraska's not blowing out Michigan, right? They need any points they can get. I go back to, what year was it? 2021. when Nebraska didn't take the field goal at the goal line and they needed
Oh
those
yeah.
points, and then Michigan ends up winning by 3. What if Nebraska's in a similar situation and like Clemson last week, and they need a 29-yarder, but the pressure is on? That could be the determining factor. So, what's your take on the kicker situation? How important is Nebraska's kicker in this game, or do you think it's a non-factor because Nebraska's going to have to score as many points as possible, and field goals just won't get it done anyway?
Um, kicker, if kicker, I think is critical. It's so hard for me because Michigan on paper, and I even think from the eye test, is a much better team.
Yeah,
But it is a road game. You need all the points you can get, and both like to limit possessions. It's not like Michigan's coming out 2021 Ohio State spread with CJ Stroud, and they're just gonna score and
Michigan's
only take
goal isn't to score 60 points.
exactly. Their goal is to score 30,
Yep.
maybe upwards of 40 if they want to send a message,
Mm-hmm.
chew up clock, and get out of there. They've treated every game like a business trip, which also somewhat instinctively tells me they're saving a lot of their actual, potential for a bigger opponent. Perhaps maybe this game. Tristan Alvano, I think both of his misses were from longer than 40 yards, though. He made one
No, I
from,
don't. I think he missed a short one. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. He missed a 41 yarder or 42 yarder, and
yep,
I think he missed a shorter one, but I can't remember.
okay,
Either way,
okay,
it doesn't matter. He hasn't had any kicks yet that were from 40. Did he have a 45 yarder? Anyway, he hasn't had any 50 yarders or anything close
yeah.
to it. Maybe a
He hasn't
47
proven yet.
yarders is his longest. So he's missing kicks that he should make and that I think he will make in the future. But
Yeah.
the pressure's different when you're a true freshman. You got to get experience under your belt.
Yeah, it's the number 2 team in the country as well. There's a lot of pressure there if Nebraska's in the game and is competitive. And for Michigan briefly as well, they have a kicker in James Turner who's I think 3 of 5 on field goals right now. He's a very boomer bust kicker. I'm curious to see how he does
Michigan's
in this
kicker is boomer
environment.
bust.
Yeah, he missed an extra point. He shanked. It was a long field goal, but it was a very bad shank. Like it was I watched that. I immediately knew we do not have anything close to Jake Moody, but he does have a powerful leg. He made one from 50 yards, so he has a high ceiling, but I think a low floor. And I'm curious where he lands if we use him in this game.
So I want you to take off your analysis hat. I want you to think of it from a fan perspective. You're a Michigan fan, and it's a 50-50 chance. This is all hypothetical. It's a 50-50 chance that it's Harburg or it's Sims walking on the field at quarterback on Saturday. Who are you more afraid to have to face?
Harburg, easily.
How come?
I think Harburg, he hasn't thrown any picks yet. I know you said take off my, hat. So, yeah. I think Harburg's just better quarterback. He's had 2 wins so far. And watching him use his legs, I mean, he had a 74-yard run, and then he had another run of 70 or more yards that was called back due to a penalty.
Yeah.
He can fly. Like any I mean, he looks literally like a running back when he's in space.
He's
It's
like
crazy.
he's like Jeff Sims as a runner, which I don't think many of us knew because we hadn't seen him at full go yet, and now we've seen him in 2 games, and yeah, he is a legit runner. But
Yeah.
as a passer, my fear is this the game where we see the turnovers come out, where we see him try to force the issue or try to make a big play? Is this the game where I don't want to say gets benched, but has to be pulled because things are starting to go that Jeff Sims direction, you know?
Yeah.
It doesn't look like it's going to be it's going to be an option because Sims is going to be available to play. But Harburg is fully healthy. Sims is not. So it feels like no matter what we want, we're getting one thing. And although I'd prefer Harburg, and I think most people would prefer Harburg, I have seen some comments from Michigan fans saying that they'd rather take Harburg against Sims because Sims might have a higher upside and you wouldn't want to get Sims on a good day, but it'd be okay to get Harburg because most likely he's going to have a tougher time with this opponent than he has the last 2. So
Yeah.
different takes on it. I guess we'll find out. Someone asked about Josh Fleeks. I can't find the comment. Said something about him and if we're going to see him this week. So I'm not sure if you know who Josh Fleeks is. He's the guy transferred from Baylor. He plays receiver and running back. they moved him over to running back. He's like 5'11", 200, really fast. He's pretty much a utility knife, can be used in different ways. Haven't seen him much this year. I think he only has a couple catches. Played receiver, though. Now they're moving him to running back to try and play that Ramir Johnson role. I'm not sure if he's going to play this week or if he's going to have a really limited role this week because he's still trying to learn that role. But I don't think we'll see much of him. This is a response to the comment above. I don't think we'll see much of him, if any. Maybe a couple plays at receiver to come in to help block. But who was it? Oh, it was Sean Callahan made a comment that he would rather see Nebraska play guys like Fleeks and guys who are older and more experienced because Michigan is an older and more experienced team. And if you're going to have to play those guys, you want to match up with older, bigger, more physical guys who've been there before and not put true freshmen in the game like Quentin Ives. And Emmett Johnson's another guy who hasn't played very much, but you throw him out there, this would be his first real game action. It would be coming against a really strong defense and a really physical group that, we just don't know how we perform against. So Michael says, ask Sam if we can borrow Donovan Edwards since we don't have a deep running back room and they have Corum. They have too much. They need to share. So this year so far, they've run it a little bit. They haven't run it a ton. Donovan Edwards plays the backup role to Blake Corum. At what point do they break him out and let him run more?
Oh, that's difficult. And it's difficult because when he has gotten carries, he's not even averaging 4 yards per carry.
Does he
And
not?
he's either being,
Does he not look as good as he looked last year? Because when I watched him last year, he looked great.
yeah, he has 100 yards as a receiver. He's looking great as a receiver, like receiving threat, whether lined up as a receiver or out of the backfield. But I think he's either being too patient or too impatient. He's not hitting stride at the proper moment or, finding the correct hole to go through. I think he's due for a breakout game at some point, though. He's just too good, in my opinion. And his supporting cast's too good as well.
Yeah,
Um,
I liked him last year a lot, and I thought we'd see a lot more heavy run game because you have two backs you can split it off between. Obviously, Corum's the feature guy, but
yeah.
question for Sam from Colby. Was there ever a point a few years back where you were seriously questioning Harbaugh's? I always get Harbaugh and Harburg confused now that I constantly read Harburg's name. Questioning
Yeah.
Harbaugh's ability to get his team where it is now.
Oh, that's an easy answer. Yeah, I thought he should have been fired after 2020, and look where we are right now.
Thank God they
Um,
didn't get rid of him. How'd you feel
oh,
when they
thank
said that
goodness.
they were going to get, or when he had said he was going to try and get an NFL job, or he had leaned that way and was interviewing?
After 2021, I was mad. After 2022, I wasn't as mad because I
Mm-hmm.
felt we were in a better place. Um, it seems to be an annual thing that Jim
Well, now
Harbaugh
it's
is going
becoming an
to.
annual thing because it seems
Yeah,
like he wants to be an NFL coach.
yeah. It seems like, oh, well, I'm gonna, flirt with NFL job openings, and then, he doesn't do it. I'm also wondering where his contract is. Like maybe it just happened and they gave him an extended contract, but I
What's his
thought that
current
they were
contract?
um it's actually one of the few things about Michigan football I don't know, but I knew he was making less than Ryan Day, less than Mel Tucker, less than James Franklin. He wasn't in the top 3 of highest paid Big Ten coaches. I thought he deserved a bump. I think it was
12.
around 7 million that he was making.
Yeah, I mean, he does deserve a bump because he's gotten to the playoff twice in a row.
Yeah.
So, Husker Nation, thank you for the $10 super chat. Thank you for being a member. This is obviously Harburg's first real test. Do you think that if he does decent, this will end the QB challenge? Thanks for bringing Sam on and keep the great content coming. Well, I only get Sam on because you're here to watch him. And Sam told me if Husker Nation's there, I got to be on. So thanks for being here. So that's a question I've asked myself. I think this answer's pretty easy, Sam, but I want to know your thoughts. If,
Yes.
if,
Sorry.
wait. I know you want to jump and say yes to this, but no. Let me give you a hypothetical. It's a little more challenging. If Harburg comes out, Nebraska loses 31-14. He throws one interception, no fumbles, scores a rushing touchdown, and has a passing touchdown. Looks good, not great. Do you think they roll with Harburg? Do you think they go back to Sims?
Well, they should roll with Harburg if he has a passing and rushing touchdown against what
Plus
is the
one
number one.
interception.
Yeah, okay. But Michigan's defense is so good. They're so elite that to have 2 touchdowns against them,
Yeah,
Rutgers couldn't do that. No one could.
I
They
agree with you.
should immediately roll with him. If he looks good, even. I mean, Sims, I like the kid. I like the man. And when he came in the preseason, I thought he was going to be a good Big Ten quarterback. He's looked anything but good, and I hope that changes. But if Harburg, who I said well before he even played that I thought he had a high ceiling based off of what I read from scouting reports,
Yeah.
if he looks good, roll with him and develop him and get him in, because this is going to be the best defense he faces all year. I
Mm-hmm.
guarantee it. Especially with the way Iowa's defense has looked. They have some vulnerabilities that
Plenty.
Michigan, yeah, Michigan doesn't have many weaknesses, if any,
So
defensively. It's incredible.
let's twist the question then. What would
Okay.
it take in this game for Sims to get a chance against Illinois, or for Sims to be named the starter against Illinois?
It would take, oh my gosh, it would take something horrible, like the equivalent of the Colorado, or it'd take the equivalent of the Colorado or Minnesota game, except probably the turnovers happen in maybe, let's just say, a half, or they don't happen throughout the whole game. Like, he obviously can't handle the moment. He looks like a deer in headlights. Maybe because he's so lost or so under duress, he doesn't even try to run or escape the pocket. Like, his confidence is
He
lost.
just crumbles and gets sacked.
Yes, he
Doesn't
folds.
look like himself.
Exactly.
So that's what you think would need to happen, or that's what you think Matt Rule would do? What do you think Matt Rule would do? What do you think it would take for Matt Rule to make a different decision? Do you think Matt Rule? None of us know, right? I'm asking you because I talk
Yeah.
about this all the time. I need to get someone else's take because I'm tired of hearing myself talk. Do you think Matt Rule thinks the same way you do, where it needs to be a disaster? Or do you think Matt Rule is looking for any reason to put Sims in next week against Illinois?
It's a mix. But I think it leans closer to he's looking for any reason to put him in against Illinois. I mean, the way he's stuck beside him, Minnesota, Colorado, and then Harburg. Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't Harburg only start because Sims was banged up and they wanted to rest him?
Correct.
Yeah, I think he's very
Otherwise,
loyal.
quote by Matt Rule, Sims would be our starter.
Yeah, he's gonna look for a reason to get Sims back in. I think Harburg has to perform probably from Rule's perspective at an above average or good level at minimum to secure the
Secure
starting
the spot.
position. Yeah.
So let's say Harburg does play at a good level this week, like we had said. Do you think Sims still gets snaps against Illinois, or do you think that puts it to rest?
My gut tells me that Sims will still get snaps, but I think that every college football coach is much smarter than I am, so I think that would put it to rest.
Makes sense. It's so hard to get inside these guys' heads. We just have to listen to what they have to say, you know?
Yeah.
James with another $10 super chat. Thank you, brother. Appreciate you. He says he thinks Harburg has more of the intangibles than Sims. I don't know. I think if we talk about intangibles like ball handling and like vision, maybe he does. When it comes to speed, athleticism, I think they're both very similar. At first, I thought Sims was the more athletic QB and the faster QB. Now it's looking like they're equal. I'm not going to say Harburg's faster and more athletic than Sims. I think Sims is an incredible athlete too. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to know. There was a reason though that in spring ball and in fall camp, Sims was getting more reps and Sims was getting the looks to be the first guy. Just like Sam said a second ago. The coaches are paid a lot more money than we are to talk about this or to do this. We aren't paid to do this. We're paid to talk about it for fun. They're paid to make decisions that are serious, and they know some things we don't. I think that's the point. So who knows? Evanception, thank you for the $5 super chat. Thank you for being a member. Sam, say Nebraska pushes Michigan and only ends up losing by 10 or less. So Sam, in this scenario, we're going to say Nebraska lost this game 31-21, and Michigan kicked a field goal to win by 10 in the last 3 minutes of the game. Okay?
Yep.
Is Michigan still number one in your eyes, or would you drop them? And he says that he loves your content lately too.
Well, thank you, Evanception, for enjoying my content. I would say they drop in probably a few spots. That's no disrespect to Nebraska. I just think
I was about to ask, what the
Washington,
hell's wrong with Nebraska? Nebraska's on the upswing. They'd be on a 3-0 streak, new quarterback, the energy's flowing.
yeah. But really what it is just Washington right now, in my eyes, is played the more impressive ball than Michigan. Michigan just has less questions, more talent. And Ohio State also just beat Notre Dame. There's other teams that have good performances and good resumes to where temporarily, especially since I'm predicting Michigan to win by more than 10, I'd have to think, like, why? Why did this happen? I guess maybe there's a world that they'd come out number one, but I'd have a very hard time justifying that just from how I'm processing it.
How do you think it would affect them in the rankings?
Um,
Let's say all the top
well,
five win.
all the top five win?
Top five win. Michigan wins in this scenario that we talked about, wins by 10, but kicks a field goal to win by 10 in the very end in kind of garbage time. How does
Yeah.
it affect them in the AP poll?
Um, I'd ashamedly say they probably wouldn't drop much. I mean, they struggled against Bowling Green. They haven't scored more than 30 points or 35 points in a game, and they've still remained the dominant number two in the same way that Georgia has struggled and they've remained the dominant number one.
I've been surprised by that too. But again, there aren't teams who are playing that much better to where you're like, well, somebody's got to jump Georgia because
Yeah,
Michigan would have been the
exactly.
one, and Michigan hasn't been doing anything crazy.
Nope.
Caleb, another $10 super chat. I appreciate you. Does Heinrich play better with the factor that he is a homegrown Husker, or is he a potential NFL QB? I'll let you answer first.
I think that um I think that certainly since he was it's such a tough question to answer. NFL quarterback, I mean, I'd have to say there's always that chance, but that's so difficult.
Yeah,
I would say that he certainly has a higher ceiling than Sims because he's younger, and Sims just Georgia Tech was arguably as much of a disaster, if not more, than Scott Frost's Nebraska. Um, I think that he'll play better than Sims. And I also think that in this game, there is a chance that, he comes out and this is his best game, even if the stats wouldn't reflect that. He's facing such a good defense that if he finished with a touchdown pass and a rushing touchdown, even with one pick, like you said earlier, I'd say that would be his best game if
it
he
would
finished
be.
with those statistics.
It would be.
NFL quarterback, well, he's tall, he has weight and muscle and speed to him. I'd say, like, just from a build standpoint, probably. But beyond that, I don't know.
He's not even he's not Anthony Richardson because he doesn't have the
Yeah.
deep ball accuracy. I would I would say it's the factor is that he's a homegrown Husker, and that's what's making him play so well at times, right? And that's why he would be so good this weekend. He's not an NFL QB. He could play in the NFL as another position, maybe a tight end or a receiver. I know there's a guy named Surratt in the NFL, plays for the Jets, who was a quarterback for UNC a few years back, transitioned to linebacker, and now he's getting paid big as a linebacker in the NFL. Started off as a college quarterback. So quarterbacks can make the switch. Uh, anyway, going back to the homegrown Husker deal, it is such an honor to be a player for Nebraska when you grew up admiring and loving that program the way that all of us did. Imagine what you would give for that program. And when I'm saying you, I'm talking to the chat, not talking to Sam. Imagine what you or I would give for that program if we were on that field. It means so much to us, and there's so much inside of us that wants to be good for all the people who love that team as much as we do, that it makes you play with a different edge, I think. That's why we saw Harburg play so tough that first game against Northern Illinois. It meant a lot. He had Eric Crouch on the sideline, a guy he grew up watching, right? It's a big deal. And him knowing that he has a chance to change the trajectory of this program with this win is going to fire him the hell up. And hopefully it makes him play better. Now, it could also lead him to make more mistakes. It could lead him down a path of failure because he tries to push it too hard and he thinks he can be Superman, right? Because he's playing with a different adrenaline. I don't know how it's going to play out, but I do think that there's a different edge he comes in with than Sims. Follow up question from Coach G. A lot of you guys have a major hard on for Heinrich Harburg. God damn. Why all the hate for Sims? Some drop snaps? So a lot of people have a hard on for Harburg because number one, Harburg has won 2 games. Number two, Harburg has looked like he has the same talent as a runner as Jeff Sims. Number three, he doesn't stare down receivers and he doesn't drop snaps the same way that Sims did. So it's like, okay, well, these situational snaps or whatever it is that's happening that we can blame on the O line or the offense, it felt like it was more of a Sims issue. He didn't fall on the ball. He wasn't ready for the moment, however you want to say it, because we've heard it described in 500 different ways from all these different analysts. When you see Harburg with the same upside, with less downside, it makes you automatically rock with him. I'm speaking for the masses, okay? Sims can be great. Sims can be really good or have potential to be really good, but we don't know if he is or not. We haven't seen it. And because they haven't seen it, they're not excited about the idea of taking out someone who's been sufficient and putting in someone in who's been deficient. Does that describe it pretty well, Sam?
I would say so, yeah. I mean, Sims against Colorado, watching that game, at times standing up from the couch just because I was really invested in that matchup. Like, I
Mm,
predicted Nebraska to win. I wanted the Big Ten to win, so I'm a Nebraska fan in this moment.
mm-hmm.
He dropped snaps that were not low, that weren't high. It almost to me was it's like what Gus Johnson said during the game. Like Gus Johnson even said out loud, Nebraska is going to lose because Jeff Sims, I'm paraphrasing, he's because Jeff
Yeah,
Sims is at
because they
quarterback.
wouldn't bench him.
Yeah. Also throwing like to a Colorado defensive back as if he was the wide receiver. That was a terrible interception. Harburg just doesn't have he hasn't made the same mistakes.
That's why people are excited for him. They're excited for him because they haven't seen them and they see upside. So if
Yes.
you see the same upside from 2 guys, you're going to go with the guy who gives you less downside. Now, I'm an advocate for whatever the coaches think is best because I've said it many times before. They know better than me. They're paid way more money than most coaches in the country to make these really hard decisions. So I'm expecting Matt Rule to come in and make the right one. If he decides it's time to go with Sims, I'll trust it. Now, are there times when I think maybe we need to give another guy a chance to see what we've got? Yes, I made a comment. I made a whole video saying why it was time to bench Jeff Sims and bring in Heinrich Harburg. And I stand by that. And I'm glad I do because I was right in that scenario because now we know that there is a competent backup. And now these coaches know that they don't only have one option. So that's the takeaway there. Uh, what about DBs? Nebraska has some strong DBs. They have Omar Brown. They've got Quentin Newsom. He'll be an NFL corner. Malcolm Hartzog, Deshaun Singleton. All of them tackle really well. What do you think about their matchup with Michigan's receivers? Who would you give the edge to, Nebraska or Michigan, when we're talking about secondary versus receivers?
I think Michigan only has one receiver who Nebraska's defensive backs will have a hard time covering for like the whole game, not if they're exhausted, just in general. That would probably be Roman Wilson.
Who would you compare him to out of the other receivers Nebraska's faced?
Out of the other receivers Nebraska has faced, um, I'm gonna
Daniel
say
Jackson was one that was really good.
I'm gonna say he's better than Minnesota's receivers. I think this is probably going bold. I'd say Jimmy Horn Jr. I'm not gonna go Xavier Weaver just because he's clearly one of the best receivers in the country, and I need to see more out of Wilson. But he's owned the number 1 jersey, which Braylon Edwards, a famous NFL receiver from Michigan, wore. He's owned that pretty well. I would give depth to Nebraska defensive backs. I'd probably give upside to Michigan receivers. Just looking at Wilson and Cornelius Johnson's had some big games against big time opponents, and he's a very good possession guy. But outside of those two, Michigan has Frederick Moore, Samaj Morgan, who are freshmen, and then Darius Clemens is a sophomore, and he's been dealing with some injuries. Um, so they have a lot of there's a big drop off, I would say, in play from the Johnson and Wilson to the next three or four guys.
So it's really just worrying about those top two.
Yes,
Kind
that's
of
my
feels that
opinion.
same way at Nebraska. You've got Billy Kemp, who's been pretty good. He's come on stronger, and it's taken more time for him to get going. You've got Alex Bullock, who's had a couple moments. Marcus Washington, who, sometimes shows up, sometimes nowhere to be found. And then Thomas Fedoni, who's finally broken out at tight end. Hasn't looked elite, doesn't have a ton of catches, but he's made the most of his opportunities so far, which has been fantastic.
Yeah.
A question about how, what was my question? About how Nebraska's receivers match up with Michigan's DBs.
Oh, I would say depth and upside. I think go with Michigan's DBs. Will Johnson, when healthy, last year played at an all Big Ten level. I think he has all American potential. Josh Wallace has had good games. He's incoming transfer from UMass. He started while Johnson's been healing up. Rod Moore was one of the best safeties in the Big Ten last year. He's also been healing up, but everyone's getting healthy. The depth's being reestablished. And then we have guys like Makari Page. We have all Big Ten players everywhere. And I can't forget about Mike Sainer still either. He has 2 interceptions. He returned 1 for 6 against Rutgers. He already has a sack, got several pressures on Gavin Wimsatt. He is going to be everywhere, whether in coverage, whether blitzing. He's a do it all. He's like a Swiss Army knife, but defensive back, not offensively. It's very impressive what he's been able to do. And he started out at Michigan as a receiver. He made the transition to DB last year, and he excelled at it very, very quickly. Fedoni at tight end, I know you said he hasn't looked elite yet, um, but
No, he
I think
hasn't
the
looked.
tough,
He hasn't looked like the 5-star that he should be playing like. Right,
yeah,
he's coming off 2 injuries. It's his first game
yep,
action. Really, I'm looking at him kind of as a freshman because this is his first game experience. So he hasn't
yeah,
come into what I think he can be, but he has shown that he's growing and progressively getting better as the games go on.
yeah. I'm curious if Michigan's linebackers and defensive backs how they'll cover him and how they'll defend against him, just because I think that he's not as proven as Johnny Langan from Rutgers, but with that 5-star potential and with him being healthy, he probably has a much higher upside than Johnny Langan does. I don't know if Michigan's faced a tight end room that has the depth or upside that Nebraska's does.
Makes sense. Nebraska. Let's say. Well, let me get to the super chat first. I got another question for you. Phil,
Okay.
thank you for the $20 super chat. Appreciate it. He says, not to beat the QB discussion to death, but the game changer for me was not the fumbles, but the half assed effort with one hand, reach over, falling on the ball. Yeah, Jeff Sims, Matt Rule came to his defense on this multiple times and said, look, it's something we didn't practice with because in practice, we're taught to get out of the way so guys don't get injured. But the reality is you got to get on the ball and make sure you're protecting it. So I don't know how to feel about that at first. Like you, I was frustrated by it. I thought, why isn't he just getting on top of it and making sure that we live to see another day? At the end of the day, he didn't do that. And Matt Rule came to his defense, which to me made a little bit of sense. So I was empathetic towards the situation. In practice, if you're not practicing jumping on the ball, then what are you going to do in a game situation? It's tough. I like Sims still. I think Sims has a chance to be successful at Nebraska. Say something happened with Harburg, he got worn down, whatever the situation may be. I do think we have a capable, as of right now, number 2 to come back in and take control. But I really do want to see him protect the ball before I say he's a good or serviceable QB, because you can't be a good or serviceable QB until you can do the bare minimum, which is protect the ball or at least fall on it when disaster strikes.
Yeah.
What was my other question for you, Sam? Oh, let's say Nebraska comes out, because there is going to be a wrinkle this weekend. Is that safe to say? Nebraska's going to come out and they're going to have to do something a little bit different. They're going to have to throw the book at you because they're not going to beat Michigan doing what they do normally, right?
No, they're going to have a difference.
So let's say the wrinkle is they run the option, and they run the option really well. They run some zone read. I don't know how they're going to do it, but let's say they run the option and they run it hard at Michigan. Is Michigan prepared in their front seven to stop that?
Oh, wow. Michigan traditionally under Harbaugh for the past 2 seasons has been a much better pass defense than a run defense. That's why they are the only defense in the country that so far Ryan Day hasn't been able to figure out because it's a passing offense and Michigan's
He's
defense is all
built to
about.
beat Ohio State.
Yes, exactly. That's why Don Brown was fired. He could win any other game depending on the circumstance, but Ohio State was just too fast, too physical. Um, I think Michigan is built to limit the option. Um, in regards of just completely shutting it down, I think that Anthony Grant is a good back as long as he doesn't fumble the football. And Harvard clearly has better legs than most Big Ten quarterbacks.
Is
So
there
I'd
is there
say
a quarterback who has better legs than Jeff Sims right now?
in the Big
Or
Ten, I
sorry, not
wouldn't
Jeff
say.
Sims, Heinrich Harburg.
In the Big Ten, I would say no. I mean, McCarthy and Aller can run, but they don't have.
They're not running
It's not the
backs.
same. Exactly. It's not the same thing. Um, I think that Michigan could limit the option. Stopping it, I think, would be a stretch. Again, I don't want to be too aggressive. Um I'm confident in Michigan, but it's a road game. Michigan is a team that isn't worried about always making big plays on defense either. That's why they don't have a lot of forced fumbles or tons of sacks, or they don't have overwhelmingly statistically impressive numbers. They're just solid, they're fundamental, and they'll be willing to let Nebraska into their own territory as long as they're confident they can halt Nebraska in the red zone and maybe force Alvano to kick field goals.
I like it. Well, my hope is that Nebraska runs the option to death and they're successful at it because I think that's the one key to getting something going. I have a good comment here from Moss. Corncray's father is probably rich, so this lowlife can waste his time trying to create a successful channel. He is always wrong. Well, Moss, first things first, my dad is successful, just like I'm successful. Success breeds success. That's why my channel's been successful. My channel makes enough money to make it so I don't have to have a job. This is what's crazy. I can be so wrong and I can have such shitty takes that people will still watch and the channel will still grow. People will still pay for sponsored ads and I will still make enough money to pay for rent in LA, travel around the entire world, and again, not work a job. Man, it feels damn good to come from a family that breeds success. I hope that whatever you're doing in your life, you're matching the energy I'm bringing. And if you watch and learn from me, you will be paid too. You will be successful too. You will have thousands of people who want to watch you talk about the thing that you're the most passionate about. You will live a fulfilling, happy, and positive lifestyle the same way I am. And one day, my dream for you is that you don't have to go into YouTube comments and troll and talk shit on people who are doing better than you, people who've got what you wish you could have. Listen, I'm not talking to you because I'm mad or because I'm too excited about your comment and getting defensive, right? I'm talking to you because this is out of love. This is out of me wanting to help you. Look at yourself in the mirror and say, what did I do today to get better? Why am I going on to Connor's channel and talking shit for what? What did you get out of it? Because you know what I got out of it? I got a rise. I got a little of emotion, a little bit of excitement. My channel, my viewers got a little bit of excitement because they're on the other end laughing at you. At you. So anyway, Moss, thank you for being here. Thank you for running the dollars up because every time you view, I get paid. Sam is going to get paid too because people watching the video get to watch this kid. This kid's in college making money off of YouTube. You're commenting on it. We all live different lives, brother. Let me scroll down to our next question. Caleb, thank you for the $5 super chat. I know it's about Michigan and Nebraska, but thoughts on the new stadium? Okay, I'm going to be honest with you guys real quick. I haven't looked too much into it. I did see an overview photo. They're enclosing the bowl, Sam. So right now, if you go to Nebraska Stadium, it doesn't connect on the back side. Is it the south side of the stadium? Might be the south side, whatever it is. It's going to connect kind of like how Tennessee looks. That's how the graphic looked that I saw on Husker Football Instagram. But when they enclose it, you'll be able to get around the entire thing. They're going to reduce capacity. So it's going to go from, I think, 84 or 82 down to 75. So they're going to lose like 10,000 seats. I don't know much about it yet. I think they said that ticket prices might go up or something. They're trying to make the fan experience better. The reason I haven't talked about it yet, though, is because I haven't looked into it much yet. I haven't listened to anyone else talk about it. I was really busy today. I told you I'm in the middle of kind of a move. So, Caleb, I don't know the answer to the stadium. Like, I don't know what thoughts to give you other than I really trust Trev Alberts. I really like all the moves he's made so far. So I'm just assuming that he's doing what the fans want because they did put out that poll, and that poll said we're going to try to make sure that we give you a game day and stadium experience that you can all enjoy and that elevates as we go on over time. It's a $450 million upgrade. That stadium is
Holy cow.
450. Wish they would have spent that on players. But look, if we're all going to enjoy the stadium for another 100 years, they've got to make these upgrades, right? So, man, just think about that, Sam. $450 million for a stadium that's used what? How many times a year? For football, it's used 6 times a year. With the playoffs, maybe it's going to be used 7 times a year if Nebraska makes the playoffs, right? 7, 8. Volleyball used it once, but they use it for a few concerts. But $450 million, just imagine how much they've got to be making on game days to recoup that money, right?
Yeah, and from the Big Ten too, the payouts, TV deals, and boosters, everything. That's wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
Wow. Let's see here. I need more questions. Sorry, my chat's rolling. Good question. This, that. Be Elite Project. Tight end. Oh, there was a commitment. Guys, I don't talk much about recruiting. There was a decommit from Pitt that ended up coming to Nebraska. I saw this in my Twitter. People were asking me these questions about Carter Nelson. They said, oh, well, maybe going after this Pitt tight end means Nebraska isn't going to get Carter Nelson. That's not true. Nebraska's still going to get Carter Nelson. Carter Nelson wants to be at Nebraska. What it means is they wanted more depth at tight end, most likely, and they wanted to make sure that they're going to build a strong tight end class. So don't think that because they went and got this Pitt tight end, that means Nelson's not coming. I am 100% sold that he is going to be here in the fall next year. And I don't know if he's going to play right away, but I do know he has a lot of upside, and we're really hoping that Nelson can develop into something great. Noah, thank you for the $5 super chat, and thank you for being a member. Off topic and random, but Jay Foreman, he's a former Nebraska player, Sam, was discussing the older teams on the drive home today. How would the 94-95 Huskers fare in today's playoff? That's interesting. So Sam was born, what year were you born, Sam?
2002.
Sam was born in 2002. I was 9 years old, and I was born in 1993. So I know a lot about Nebraska of the 90s. I've watched a lot of it, right? I paid attention to it. I've heard the stories. But to be honest, I don't know a lot about the other teams of the 90s. So I don't know how they would have fared because I don't know what the other teams or how they matched up and what they brought to the table. We know Nebraska was heavy run and dominated in the Big 12 with that heavy run. But yeah, I don't know what USC looked like back then or the schools in the South. I don't know what kind of offenses they ran. So I'm just the wrong person to ask that question to. I assume because Nebraska was dominant back then, they would be able to figure it out because they had bigger, badder players than everybody else. But yeah, I don't know the answer, and I'm going to guess Sam doesn't either. So we'll pass on that one. Thank you for the question, though, Noah. Huskerhead says he just joined. Thank you for being a member. I appreciate you. Is that what you're talking about? You joined, or you joined something else? Maybe you joined this, just the chat. Let's see. Colin says Harburg has fumbled more than Grant. Grant had 1 fumble a month ago, and it will be talked about by Nebraska fans till the end of the year. I don't think so. So I think people were tight about the Grant fumble because, oh man, it was such a crucial moment to fumble, and we hate to see it, right? But the more positive and productive games he has, the more people will forget, right? And so when you forget about it, and you're not going to talk about it as much, Grant's going to get more confidence. I guess he's not going to fumble again. And all of this will be forgotten and forgiven, right? I went and looked. Grant fumbled it 1 time in the last 101 carries. The last time he fumbled before Minnesota was back in the Illinois game, which was, I think, game 7 or game 8 of last season. So, and he was a starting running back. He had a ton of carries. So I'm not too worried about the Grant situation, and I don't think most fans will be. I think they're going to get over it. Harburg fumbling more than Grant, though. When you're at quarterback, especially when you're a new guy, there's a lot going on. You've got motions, you've got reads to make, you've got to dial in with the center. I mean, I can forgive Harburg on a couple missed snaps to start the year. I'm hoping he cleans those up. The positive note on Harburg, though, is he hasn't not gotten on the ball. He's not losing those fumbles. So, yeah. Let me see here. Uh, Husker Nation, thank you for the super chat. Sam, I have a bunch of comments in here. I'm not going to pull them up, but people are really happy with my response to the Moss guy. Thank you guys all. Yeah, I didn't say that for anything except for entertainment and to just help that guy out because he needs someone in his corner because he's got some issues if he's on my channel trolling. Because I'm a nice guy. This is a positive space. Sam, every time you come on this channel, it's pretty positive in here, right?
It is.
We try to keep it
The only
loving.
Yeah, criticism's friendly.
Yeah, I keep in mind I love the criticism because it just runs up my numbers more and more. Talk all you want. Let's get the comments going. I need comments for the algorithm. But yes, Husker Nation, that's what this comment was in response to. So thank you for the 20. I appreciate you. Let's see. Noah, in response to us talking about the stadium, says they haven't really shown much more than what they've shown in the 3 pictures that were on Instagram. It's a lot of just getting it out there. They still need board approval and to find funding. Overall, he likes the changes. Yeah, that's why I don't go too deep into it. That's why I don't cover recruiting too much because it's not a solid deal yet. Once it becomes solid and formal and they announce it, then I like to understand it and get into it. But I don't like to get my hopes up too much and get too invested in recruits or into these stadium plans or ideas because we don't know what's going to happen and what will actually come to fruition, you know? Anyway, uh, Uncle Rico, he's calling you Zuckerberg. You know, you do look a little bit like a Zuckerberg. You look better than Zuckerberg, though. I think the facial hair makes you look a little bit more adult than him. He says, does Zuckerberg realize that he just admitted Nebraska has a better defense? This is going back to when you and I were talking about Nebraska's defense and Michigan. What do you think about Nebraska's defense versus Michigan? Who does have the edge? Do you think they're comparable? I know Nebraska's 23rd nationally. Is Michigan third nationally in total D?
Yeah, they're third nationally total D. They're first in scoring. Um, I said that Nebraska had a better defense than TCU last year. I think Michigan is the much better defense than Nebraska this season, though.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
Huskerhead says, great news on Reimer. What's your thoughts on the defense this weekend? So the Reimer news was it sounded like he was going to be in concussion protocol. That was people were sending me that message yesterday like crazy. And man, frustrating, right? You don't want to lose Luke Reimer. He's kind of the heart and soul on that linebacker core. Although there are some really good linebackers around him. John Bullock, Bayer. I'm blanking on names right now. 33, Javen Wright, 3, Nick Henrich, whatever. So you've got really good guys around him, but if you lose your key guy who's probably the most experienced of all of them, then it's painful. He's going to play, is what I heard. So Reimer being back is huge. How do you think Nebraska's defense is going to fare this week against Michigan? Do you think that Michigan's going to attack them through the air? Are they going to go a little bit more run heavy? How do you think Nebraska will respond to whatever Michigan does throw at them?
I think Michigan's going to try and pass. Harbaugh, ever since he came back, said that he wants Michigan to continue to pass, and they're going to test the run. In fact, on the first drive, they might come out and run the first 3 times just to assess what they have. But they're going to pass. And I think that if Nebraska can score on offense, it will be hard to wear this defense down. But Nebraska's problem has been scoring on offense. So I think Michigan's offense, by the end of the game, I think will eventually wear down this defense,
So
likely by running.
your thinking is something along the lines of like what happened with Colorado, where Nebraska eventually just couldn't get the ball in the end zone enough. They couldn't hang on to it, and then the defense wore out.
Yeah, Michigan's offense will outpace Nebraska's offense, is kind of what I'm thinking. And probably earlier than what happened with Colorado. Like we'll see the cracks earlier. Um, but Michigan's going to want to pass, and I think they'll need to. I don't think with how their offensive line has functioned so far and the lack of big explosive plays that they can just run at Nebraska 80% of the time and expect to pull away early. I think Nebraska's defense, their front 3 has really impressed me this season. I thought it was going to be much worse, and it's good. I love what they do there. I think Michigan is going to have to be balanced at least, and maybe even creative to score on this Nebraska defense.
I hope so. I hope creative is the right word, because creative to me sounds like there's potential for turnovers and there's
Yep.
potential for some things to go wrong. And if things go wrong, that's where Nebraska can thrive. Oh man, Sam, I just want a good game. I'm going to be at the game this weekend, so I want to see something positive. I don't want to be sitting in the stands just shaking my head the entire time like I was at Colorado. I need something fun. I need, action. Caleb, thank you for the 5. Another 5 from Caleb. Caleb's the man. He's a big supporter today. Sam and Connor, could this potentially be Nebraska's last L for the season this week? Sam?
There's a road game at Wisconsin, but Michigan by far is the toughest opponent on the schedule. And if Nebraska, if Connor's wish comes true and it's at least entertaining, like maybe not the full on upset, but it's at least entertaining. He isn't shaking his head like in the first quarter, like we're already down 14-0. What's wrong? That absolutely. Every team in the West looks vulnerable. And every team in the West outside of Wisconsin, I think, looks horrendous. I think Nebraska they're better than Northwestern. I think that in retrospect, there's the potential they're better than Minnesota after seeing what Minnesota just did to Northwestern in choking that
Yep.
game. Iowa looks like trash. Their offense is statistically, it's actually worse than last year's through 4 games. It's that bad. And we don't even have to talk about Illinois struggling with MAC opponents.
So
That's
here's my take.
horrible.
If Nebraska loses this week, could it potentially be their last L? No. It could potentially set them up to only lose one more game, though. What it could do is it could give the coaches confidence in Harburg, like we talked about. It could solidify him as the starter. Then what it could do is it could teach Nebraska some lessons on defense, on how to stop an offense that can pass a little bit more. You talk about Wisconsin, who's going to try to pass a little bit more, and now we've learned from this, all right? Maybe we lose it to Maryland, maybe we lose to Iowa or Wisconsin, but the dream is we would only lose one of those 3. Every other team on the schedule is beatable. Illinois, beatable. Purdue, beatable. Michigan State, definitely. So, even the 3 that we had talked about, right? So the dream, the perfect, I'd say there's one more loss after Michigan. I don't think it's likely. I think Nebraska has at least 2 more losses after Michigan. Maybe 3. But the point is, the dream would be one more loss. I don't think there's any world where we see Nebraska going undefeated after the Michigan game. It'd be really tough. Husker Chuck says, Sam definitely has a voice for broadcasting. Sam, I've heard this a bunch of times about you. Radio at the very least, maybe a voice actor. Anyway, I was shocked how young you are. You sound much older. Well, I think you'll take that as a compliment, huh?
I do. I take that as a good compliment. I'm trying to discover a little bit about my personal life here, whether to pursue a broadcasting major or stick with economics.
Yeah, well, maybe you got a future in both. So make sure that even if you are doing
Maybe.
your economics, that you try out broadcasting, because who knows where it could go. All right, Sam. Before we get out of here, I want to talk about some of the games for this week. Let me go to our screen share. First off, our sponsor for our channel, Character Chronicles. Adam has been awesome in putting out content. You guys know he has this new channel right here on the screen, Character Chronicles. It's all you type in and you'll find it. He's got almost 10,000 subscribers. I'm on the road to 20. So we've got to get 100 more so I can hit 20, but he only needs 850 more so he can hit 10. So he and I are both on to big milestones this month. He had a huge breakdown. I started to watch it, but I had to come over here to watch the stream. I got up to the point where he started to interview a doctor or a surgeon. So that should be a pretty interesting one to watch if you guys haven't checked it out yet. It's a whole breakdown, his prediction for the Michigan game this week. But like I said, he's a huge supporter of our channel, been an awesome sponsor, and helps me to create a bunch of content. So make sure you check out his content. Make sure you check out his website, characterchronicles.com, for a bunch of my content, a bunch of Corn Nation and other Nebraska creators, and obviously everything Adam's a part of. Okay, Sam, let's go game by game. I just want you to give me your general picks. Michigan, 17-point favorite. What's your final score prediction for that game? Nebraska, Michigan.
Oh, you're not going to like this one. Michigan is not covered all season long. And I've said this in the Rutgers video, and maybe I will never be right. Michigan at some point is going to cover, I think. I think they're my number 1 team. They're too good at every position. It'll be close for a half. I think Michigan's going to want to make a statement, and eventually the offense for Nebraska and the defense will wear down. I'm going over.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you think Michigan's going to wrap the score?
Um,
Not intentionally,
that
but you think that they're going to be in position to.
they're going to be in position to, yes, especially with, I think, a turnover or two is likely
Fair.
in my mind.
Fair. Penn State, number 6 team in the country, traveling to Northwestern. It's a morning game. Northwestern coming off a big overtime emotional victory. 26.5 point favorite. Do you think Michigan or Northwestern can keep it decently close and they're going to pick up some momentum after last week, or is this where they get dominated again?
There's a better argument for Penn State to cover than for Michigan to cover. Penn State under James Franklin is on a streak where they've covered against everyone but Ohio State since their close win over Purdue last season. Northwestern's coming off an emotional win, so there's probably going to be some energy, but Penn State is just so much better. And with that upset by Northwestern, you have to be thinking that Penn State isn't going to want to overlook the Wildcats either.
Yeah, no.
So I think Penn State, being a team that likes to run up the score sometimes, they're going to win big.
I think they're going to respect Northwestern's passing game a little bit more and their ability to fight through adversity to come back in games. So it'll make them put their foot on the gas at the end. That's my guess.
Yep.
Louisiana Monroe, no, Louisiana Lafayette plays at Minnesota. I mean, does Minnesota bounce back and knock these guys out? That's my guess.
That's my guess too. Spread's only 11, right? It's
Yeah.
not like 20.
No.
Yeah, then they'll cover.
Indiana is at Maryland. Now, Indiana's been an interesting team. They aren't good, but they haven't been as bad as I thought they'd be either. They're 2-2. I thought they'd be 1-3 at this point. Does Indiana have any chance on defense to slow Maryland down? Because their defense has been okay. They held Ohio State to what, 23?
Yeah, they did.
So can they hold Maryland to a similar number?
I think so. Maryland, I think at this point last year looked better than they did this season. The difference was last year by their fourth game, they played Michigan, like a team that was much better than them. Maryland's had a pretty easy schedule. Michigan State outgained them in yards. They just gave up the ball a ton. I think Maryland is a little fraudulent, and I think Indiana, 14.5, I think Indiana will find a way to limit them. Still lose, but I think Indiana will play it closer than what people expect.
You called Maryland fraudulent. I just want to look through here real quick because they're going to play Nebraska this year. Let's say they win this game. That takes them to 5-0. Then they've got Ohio State. That takes them to 5-1. Do they win against Illinois and Northwestern?
I think so. Mind you, when I say fraudulent, it's because people are considering putting them in the top 25. And they've trailed against Charlotte. They trailed against Virginia. Towson is, Towson. Michigan State's not good. Like, they've won. But in retrospect, they're supposed to win all the games they've won so far. I think they'd beat Illinois and Northwestern, though. But they have a chance to drop one of those easily.
I think there's a good chance that they come in as a 7-2 team ranked in the top 25 by the time they get to the Nebraska game. And to be honest, with Nebraska's defense, if everything holds up the way it's been, I think Nebraska's got a really good chance at knocking them off. And that could be Nebraska's first top 25 win of the season, because my guess is they're not going to play another top 25 team before that outside of Michigan.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think Nebraska, I don't know if they're better than Maryland. I'd like to watch them more.
Yeah.
But they do have them at home, and they have a great defense. So it'll be a tough test for Mike Locksley.
Yeah, I wouldn't call Nebraska a better overall team than Maryland, but I do think the matchup could be favorable. I think that's the way to describe it.
I think that's a better way to describe it, yes.
Illinois is at Purdue. This is so interesting to me. It's an even spread, meaning either team could win. I lean Purdue because I trust their quarterback more, but I trust the Illinois team around Altmaier more than I would trust Purdue's team, because Purdue's so mistake prone. They're obviously in a first year with a new coach. They're figuring things out and working out some kinks. Who do you like?
Originally, I was going to go with Purdue, but then when you talked about the surrounding cast, and then I remember it's Brett Bielema, who just has this, this obsession with winning close games against almost anyone. I'd pick Illinois.
Yeah, it's going to be a tight one, I think, because you got two coaches who know each other so well, you know?
Oh
So
yeah.
it should be a really interesting watch. It's on Peacock, the worst network you could possibly put a game on. What channel's Nebraska, or what time? 12:30. So no one here will be watching that game because they'll be focused on Nebraska, Michigan. But yeah, just I don't understand this whole Peacock thing. I hate those Peacock games because I can't watch them. Okay, the last game, which I can't scroll to for whatever reason. Oh, because let me see. Maybe if I do it this way.
Yep.
There we go. Michigan, Iowa. Night game in Iowa. They just got blown out at Penn State. Michigan State, on the other hand, not good. That's all I need to say. They're not good. They have a few weapons. They don't get them the ball well, and their tight end, who was supposed to be their best player, what's his name, Malik Carr. He's been
Yeah.
underwhelming. I mean, nothing to look forward if you're a Michigan State fan. I'm gonna say Iowa wins in dominating fashion. They need to get to that 25-point mark, that average, and I think this is an opportunity for them to try and run it up. What do you think?
Yeah. You think they're going to cover? I'm
Michigan?
almost
Yeah.
shocked in asking that. Because as much as Michigan State's defense has weaknesses, they do have like enough players to, make Maryland score and not
Mm-hmm.
just effortlessly go down the field. Iowa's offense, they I thought they were going to upgrade so much, and they're
No,
worse than they were
they're
last
terrible.
season, and
But the
they have
thing
tons of
the
injuries.
thing is, I still trust Iowa's coaching more. I still trust their players more than I would trust Michigan State. And I do think Iowa at home at night is a really tough place to compete in. I think the noise is going to be a factor. I just don't think Michigan State's very well prepared to play this year. I think they dominated Central Michigan and some other non-factor. But outside of that, this is not a bowl team. And I
It
just
is
don't
not,
think
no.
that Iowa is in a position where they can afford to play soft. They have to go as hard as possible. They have to run up the numbers, and they have to make sure, I mean, at least if you want to keep your OC, they have to make sure that they push and that they score on them.
Okay. I'm going to go bold here, and I'm going to say that even if they try hard, they can't do it. Iowa blocked two punts of Iowa State's last year. I know it's a rivalry game. They blocked two punts from Iowa State last year
Yep.
and still found a way to lose. It's the first time I think that ever happened in college football. I think he who shall not be named, as I've said
I
before,
like
Brian
that.
Ferentz, is so incompetent. I think Michigan State, if they can get one or two big plays and not turn it over a ton, they can win. I'm picking them to cover, and I think this Iowa team's just so inefficient.
They are.
Screw
I
it.
I don't disagree with you. I just
I'll
think that
pick Michigan
I'm
State.
picking the team who's less bad in this spot. That's how I'm looking at it.
That makes sense. And they got humiliated on the road and they're
Yeah.
returning, home. So logically, Iowa, I just think,
I'm going to
I
buy
don't know.
low. I'm going to buy low, sell high, and this is the perfect time to do it. Couple top
Yeah.
25 games I want to talk about. First one, Oregon State is hosting Utah. Oregon State last week fought back, couldn't win it. They lost by 3 to Washington State. Now they've moved from a 3 to a 4.5 point home favorite over Utah, who I think has a top defense in the country, like top 5. Who do you like in this one?
Do we know if Cameron Rising is healthy and if he's playing?
I By the line, I would say he's not.
Okay, then I'm picking Oregon State to bounce back and win.
I think Oregon State's really good. I think last week was kind of weird. I don't know how they started off so slow. Their offense couldn't do anything, but I really like their quarterback, DJ Ungalele. I like their running backs. I just think Oregon State has a lot to play for in this spot, and they should be able to win. How
Agreed.
about USC Colorado? Now, obviously USC is going to win. Do you think Colorado gets blown out back-to-back weeks, or do you think they bounce back strong and they look decent in this spot?
I think they bounce back, but not because they're, this top 25 team. USC's defense has looked like an abomination despite adding talent from the transfer portal. Did you watch the Arizona State game by any chance, like Pac-12 After Dark?
No.
Um, USC was struggling with Drew Pine,
I did
and
I did see I did see that.
yeah, Drew Pine was burning their corners. It was horrible. I'm picking Colorado to cover, but obviously USC will win, and I think by double digits. I just don't think by 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, I kinda like Colorado in this spot. I'm not sold 100%, but I like them at home. It'll be a morning game for USC, like 9 a.m. I'm not sure if that even matters, but people are trying to make it a big deal, so who knows. How about Kansas at Texas? I personally am a huge Kansas fan just because it's kind of a Nebraska story. Down bad for years, couldn't get things figured out, worked with what they had, found a way to get back to a bowl game, and now they're competing. I mean, they're 4-0 and they're in the top 25. Do you like them to cover here? Do you think they could potentially pull an upset, or is Texas just too dominant?
I'm not going to pick the upset because I think Texas is dominant. And Kansas also beat them in the
2 years
same
ago.
stadium 2 years. Yes, on that 2 point conversion. I do think Kansas competes, and it wouldn't be the biggest surprise in the world if Texas had a Texas moment and Kansas won. But I'm not going to pick Kansas to win. I need to see it in order for me to believe that, Kansas, because if they beat Texas, then we're no longer talking top 25. We're talking about there. I guarantee you there'd be talk like, is Kansas the new TCU if they came in
Yeah,
and won this
for
game
they'd be a top 12 team. That would be incredible. A
easily?
road game against Texas, who just beat Bama. Uh, I don't think it's going to happen. It's on at the same exact time as Nebraska. Wish it was a little bit later so I could watch, but it is something I'll be tracking. Okay, I think there's one more I care to talk about. Ole Miss is hosting LSU. LSU obviously has an electric offense. Their quarterback has been insane. Last week, though, their defense kind of folded and they almost lost to Arkansas. Ole Miss has a really good quarterback, too, who can do what KJ Jefferson did last week. And I would actually argue he might be better than KJ Jefferson, especially since they're at home. Do you think Ole Miss can win this one outright?
Yeah, will. I really offensively, LSU's looked so good and so dominant. And I got to confess, I'm not a big SEC expert. I'd be inclined to pick LSU, but I know that Josh Pate's picking Ole Miss to come out and beat LSU.
Josh
And it
Pate picked Ole
seems,
Miss.
yeah, and it seems like you're heading that way too, just
I'm
from what
I
you were
already
talking.
think they're going to win outright. I'm a big believer in Ole
Oh,
Miss, and I think they're a money line play. If Josh Pate likes them to win too, I'm double all in on Ole Miss.
by the way, Lane Kiffin, if he beats LSU, this is like one of the few wins against, good teams. So that
Yeah,
would be a big feather in his cap and a big program moment if he does win this. I think LSU right now looks like the best team in the SEC West. So if Ole Miss ends up winning as well, that's going to be chaos
which is what we love to see.
indeed.
James, thank you for the $5 super chat. He says, do you think there's a pathway for Nebraska to break into the top 25 under the first year of Matt Rule? What's the pathway, Sam?
If you beat Michigan, you'd
Okay.
probably enter
Oh,
immediately,
no,
but
I don't agree with that. I don't think a
okay.
3-2 Nebraska winning that game at home would break them in immediately. Do you? Like really believe that? Think about that.
It maybe I should walk that back, but they are the number 2 team in the country, and you would be 3-2. And if Colorado does, I don't know. It's difficult, but there's a pathway for that. The easier
Okay, well let's
pathway.
let's take out that
Okay.
factor, okay? The Michigan game, they lose it, okay? Because obviously,
Okay.
if they beat Michigan, we can assume that they are going to win some more games.
Yes.
Let's say they lose to Michigan. How do they get to the top 25? They'd have to win their next three to get to 6-3. That's
Yeah.
not enough. Then you got to win that fourth game, which I think comes against Maryland. I guess that's the way, huh?
I'd say 7-3 Nebraska with how much chaos has been going around, especially if Minnesota and Colorado win a few more games and Michigan is undefeated as well. That'd be a pretty good 7-3 resume.
Really good
I'd say
7-3
seven and
resume.
three. I'd say
Be-
7-3 is top 25 for most
they would
teams.
have beaten Illinois. They would have beaten Purdue, Michigan State, and Maryland. I think that's worthy of top
Yeah.
25. So I think that's the path right now. Obviously, beat Michigan, and the path's pretty simple. Win one more game, and you're probably in. Maybe Sam's right. Maybe they would be in. I mean, 3-2. There's probably some 3-1 teams right now in the top 25. Let's see.
Clemson still got votes for a top 25 after being 2-2, but that's like name brand stuff,
A little bit
probably.
different. Yeah, a little bit different. Okay, here. in the top 25 now, you've got all 4-0s, some 3-1s. I don't think there will be a team who's 3-2 after this week in the top 25. You could maybe make the argument for Ole Miss because Ole Miss has a loss to LSU and Alabama at 3-2. Oregon State, I guess you could make the argument because their losses would be to Washington and Utah, so they would be 3-2. But Nebraska, I don't think they'd get there.
Okay.
That's my guess. But hey, I could be wrong. I don't know. I don't make the votes. But I do know that some of these people who do make the votes, they're just I don't know. They're writers who don't know what they're talking about all the time. I don't
One
like
guy
having
had
their votes
Florida
in.
at 7. Like he had Florida at 7th in his
Yeah,
ballot.
I don't know if these guys are just major homers or what their deal is.
Yeah. I mean, when you only beat Charlotte 22-7, I mean, and then you got dominated by Utah. I don't know, but then again, Florida found a way to dominate Tennessee, and if they beat Kentucky, then in my mind they'd be deserving of a top 25 placement.
Yeah, that's true. I don't think Florida will beat Kentucky this week either, though.
I agree with you on that.
At home, I think is it a night game or no? It's not a night game. It's an afternoon.
Kentucky's just nasty defensively. Like they always play to their competition, and I don't trust Graham Mertz even though he's looked better. I still don't trust him.
Yeah, I don't trust him either. But he has looked better in these last couple of weeks. Moss says, when was the last time Neb was ranked? 2019 against Colorado. It was like the third game of the season. Been a long time. Okay, final question before I'm going to get you out of here because we've been on here for an hour and a half. Senruk says, what do you think Rule's focus is for tomorrow's game? I'm going to go first. I think his focus is how do you run the ball with Heinrich Harburg enough to create lanes that he can throw to. Is it going to be successful? I've got no idea because Harburg would have to be, on his game tomorrow, making good decisions and not letting that Michigan defensive backfield, who's really good at defending the pass, get underneath on him and take one back to the house or just flip the position too quickly. That's my guess for what Rule's focus is. What do you think it is?
I think it's pressuring. It's either pressuring McCarthy. It's finding ways to maximize their D line's performance against Michigan's O line. Can they shut down the run? Can they, force Michigan to, if they get down into Nebraska territory, take field goals? Can they get McCarthy to make a mistake? Because Michigan hasn't punted the ball too much. Their special teams is outside of the top 100 in efficiency. So if they can force Michigan to punt, kick field goals, get them uncomfortable, and then offensively, I liked what you said. Get Harburg involved enough and make the run game enough of a threat to where you can situationally pass and just confuse Michigan's defense. I think it starts with Nebraska's defense establishing themselves as like, hey, we're serious. We can get after you. And you just can't run. You can't run on our throats and, take away the game from us. That's not how it's going to work here in Lincoln. And force them to punt and with a kicker that has a lot of upside and even downside, force them to make some field goals in a road environment.
I like it. Well, I think defense is going to be a very big key for Nebraska, so I hope they're on top of it. The good news is Tony White's been pretty damn good so far this year. It's
Oh,
just
yeah.
the offense has to hold up their end of the deal. Thank you for the $20 super chat. We got one in from the Crypto Badger, known as TAKL Farms. Throw the bones. That's going to be the key, just like you said. Defense has to step up, and if they do, I think it'll be a game the entire way through. Just hold Michigan to field goals, make them burn off a lot of clock, and they could be up, 10-3 at one point in the third quarter, and Nebraska's still alive. There is still a chance. There is still hope. So, well, Sam, I appreciate you a ton for coming on. It's always fun to have you. I told you I'd come onto your show. I'm going to sign off here, and then after you and I can talk about your stream and everything. So give me a minute to
All right.
close out. But everybody in Corn Craze Army, thanks you for coming on. They love having you. They talk about you in the Discord, and they love your takes. So I'll talk to you in a minute.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on. Okay, so tomorrow morning I'm up at 4:20 a.m. I'm to the airport, and I will be in Lincoln by tomorrow afternoon. I'm extremely excited for this one, not only because I think there's a chance we're going to get a good game, but because I'm excited for the environment. I'm excited to go to a stadium that's going to have 90,000 people in it and to be a part of the pageantry and to see Nebraska play for the first time, well, the first time this year at home. I'm pumped because I get to take a friend with me. I'm pumped because I get to meet a bunch of you. So, although the circumstances might not be great, we might not have as good of a record as I would have hoped we would, and they might get beat down a little bit because it's Michigan. I'm still going to make the most of it. So, I hope you do too. I hope you enjoy this game Saturday. I hope there are positive takeaways. And in general, I hope you're enjoying this college football season because, like I've told you 100 times before, it's only for 12 weeks, it's only for 3 months of the year. And then we got to go back to our normal lives and not get football for a long, what is it, 9 months? Anyway, thank you guys for being here. Thank you for hitting the like button. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. Thank you for sharing this video with everyone. Just thank you for the super chats. Thank you for all the support and for allowing me to be here with you. I mean, what, 3, 4 times a week? It's just been so fun to be able to get back into this. And now we're on a rhythm. So we've got the live chats going. We've got the viewers coming in for the streams. And I get to do them all the time. So I'll be back after the game on Saturday. Don't know what my plan is or where I'll be, but I'm going to try and do a live stream from somewhere outside of Memorial Stadium after my meetup. Meetup again is at the Legacy statue. I'm going to take pictures with everybody, meet everybody, get your YouTube handles so I can put faces to names, the whole deal. With all of that said, thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next one. Go Big Red.